TIFU by accidentally revealing my biggest secret to my family during Thanksgiving dinner. Thanksgiving has always been a big deal in my family. It's one of those holidays where we gather around a massive table filled with food, play awkward board games, and talk about everything under the sun. There are always a few moments where we all stop and ask ourselves, why did we invite Uncle Bill again? And who thought it was a good idea to let Cousin Jenny bring her weird homemade cranberry salad? This year was no different. My wife, Emily, and I had been preparing for the big day for weeks. We were hosting for the first time, which was both exciting and stressful. To add to that, I had a secret. A big one. A few months ago, I had started a side hustle. It wasn't the kind of thing I'd ever mention in front of my family, because they would definitely judge me. I had discovered an underground world of, well, let's just say it was a hobby that wasn't exactly mainstream. In short, I had been playing a role in an online fetish community. I won't go into the details of the nature of the community, but just know that it wasn't something you bring up at a family gathering. So, as Thanksgiving Day approached, I made sure to delete any traces of my secret life. I wiped my browser history, closed the apps, and even went as far as uninstalling a couple of programs from my computer just to be safe. Emily was in the kitchen cooking, and I was in the living room making sure the TV and music were set for the gathering. The kids were playing in the backyard, and everything seemed normal. The doorbell rang, and my parents and siblings arrived in a flurry of noise and holiday cheer. Hugs were exchanged, compliments about the food started flying, and soon, everyone settled around the table. Emily, who is the social butterfly of our relationship, did most of the talking, making sure everyone had a drink and was comfortable. I kept to myself, a little more quiet than usual, because my mind kept wandering back to my secret. I tried to focus on the conversation, but my thoughts kept drifting. My brother, David, was talking about his new job and how things were going with his girlfriend, and then my sister, Laura, started asking me about my work. I replied that everything was fine, but she pressed on, "Come on, tell us something interesting. You've been a bit of a mystery lately." It was a harmless question, and I should have just brushed it off, but my mind was racing. My gut told me to keep my mouth shut, but for some reason, I couldn't. Maybe it was the wine, maybe it was the nerves, or maybe it was just a weird mix of all of it. I looked around at my family, so familiar, so comfortable. They had no idea what had been happening in my life over the past few months. They had no idea that I'd been getting up in the middle of the night, sneaking away to my office, wearing strange costumes, and taking part in weird online events. They had no clue how out of control my little side hobby had gotten. "Actually, there's something I've been meaning to tell you guys," I said before I could stop myself. The room went quiet. Emily, sitting next to me, looked at me with wide eyes, her eyebrows raised in concern. My mother, always the curious one, leaned forward. "What is it, honey?" she asked, her voice full of intrigue. I should have stopped right then. I should have realized that no matter how much I trusted them, this wasn't the moment. But instead, I continued. "I've been involved in something recently," I started, my voice faltering. "It's kind of an online community. It's, a bit niche, but I thought I'd share." Everyone was silent now, waiting for me to continue. My brother, who was always the first to make fun of me, smirked slightly, clearly expecting me to reveal something ridiculous, like that I had joined a knitting club or started playing competitive video games. But no. This was far from ordinary. It's a fetish community," I blurted out before I could stop myself. The words were out, hanging in the air like a bomb. Silence. No one moved. No one spoke. My mother blinked several times, her mouth opening and closing like a fish trying to understand the words I had just uttered. My sister's eyes widened in shock. My dad, who had been sipping his wine, spit it out across the table, coughing violently. Emily looked at me, her face a mix of disbelief and concern. "Wait, what?" she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I had no idea how to recover from this. I could feel the blood draining from my face, and suddenly, the entire room felt like it was closing in on me. My mind was racing. I tried to think of something, anything, to say to make this less awkward, but my brain was stuck. I had just revealed a side of me that no one knew existed, and I had no idea how to backpedal. My dad was still coughing, and my mom was holding a hand to her chest, her face pale. A fetish community? What kind of fetish are we talking about here? She finally asked, her voice trembling. Is this some kind of group for costumes or something? I was mortified. No, not exactly, I stammered. I don't know how to explain it. It's just something I've been exploring, and I guess I didn't want anyone to know. I didn't think it was something you guys would understand. There was a long, awkward pause as everyone digested what I had just said. The air in the room felt thick with confusion and judgment. My brother finally spoke up, breaking the silence. Okay, hold up, David said, his tone more curious than critical. So, you're saying you've been participating in some weird internet thing that involves costumes or whatever? And this is what you've been doing in the middle of the night? I nodded, my face red with embarrassment. Yeah, pretty much. For a moment, no one said anything. Then, Emily finally broke the tension. She gave me a sympathetic look and gently reached over, placing her hand on mine. It's okay, babe, she said, trying to reassure me. I mean, it's weird, but if it's something that makes you happy, we can talk about it later, all right? My parents were still processing what I had said, and the awkward silence persisted, but Emily's words helped calm me down a little. That night, after the dinner was over, I found myself sitting in the living room with Emily, my mind spinning. I knew I had made a mistake by mentioning it at all. I wasn't sure if my family would ever let me forget this conversation, or if they'd understand that it was just a weird phase I was going through. The moral of the story? Never, ever reveal your weirdest secrets during Thanksgiving dinner. Trust me, it's not worth the confusion or the awkward dinner table conversation that follows. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. So this happened a few years ago when I was trying way too hard to be liked by my girlfriend's family. For context, her dad was this stoic, ex-military, self-proclaimed man's man type, and I was a 22-year-old college student who knew more about microbreweries than anything remotely useful or masculine in his eyes. I'd been dating his daughter, Mia, for about 8 months and was finally invited to their family home for a weekend. It was my shot to make a good impression, so naturally, I planned an elaborate dinner. Mia told me her dad loved no-frills meat dishes. Great. I can do meat. I'd worked part-time in a hipster bistro during college. I figured if I made him something simple and hearty, I'd win him over. So I offered to cook dinner Saturday night and he actually said, let's see if the kid can do more than toast and cereal. Challenge accepted. Here's where the screw-up begins. The morning of the dinner, Mia's mom mentioned there was a bunch of meat in the deep freezer in their garage. Take whatever you want, she said. I found a few large, vacuum-sealed bags, some clearly labeled, pork shoulder, venison steaks, and one unmarked one. The unmarked one had this dark, rich color, almost like a beef roast, but it was leaner and smelled a little gamey when thawed. I assumed it was some kind of wild game, maybe elk or boar. Her dad was an avid hunter, so it made sense. I thought, perfect. Rustic. Masculine. Meat. I made this whole spread, seared and roasted the mystery meat with garlic, rosemary, and red wine. Made potatoes dauphinoise, fancy scalloped potatoes, but I didn't call them that because I wanted to live. Green beans with bacon. I even made a chocolate soufflé. I plated it all with actual pride and served it like some sort of culinary badass. Her dad took one bite, looked me in the eye, and said, "Damn, that's some good dog." I laughed. Like awkward haha, thinking it was a joke. But his expression didn't change. He looked at me as Mom, who had frozen mid-chew, eyes wide. Then he put his fork down and asked me where I got the meat. I told him, the unmarked bag from the garage freezer. Silence. He stands up, walks out without a word. Mia follows. I just sit there, sweating into my soufflé. 10 minutes later, Mia comes back pale and quietly says, "You just cooked Bear." Bear was their dog. Was. Turns out Bear had passed away a few months earlier, old age, natural causes, and her dad, being the sentimental, messed up guy he is, couldn't bring himself to bury the dog right away. So he had Bear cremated. Except when the pet crematorium got delayed due to COVID backlogs, he decided to preserve Bear until they could reschedule. Preserve equals vacuum seal and deep freeze his corpse. I had just slow roasted their beloved family dog with garlic and red wine and fed it to the entire family, including the man who raised him from a puppy. I wanted to disintegrate into the floor. Mia's dad didn't talk to me for the rest of the trip. Mia didn't break up with me, but she couldn't look at me for 2 days. Her mom tried to console me by saying, "Well, at least we know he was marbled nicely," which somehow made it worse. But the kicker? The worst part? They didn't hate the meal. They actually liked it. No one spit it out. Her dad even finished his plate before realizing what it was. There were leftovers. Her mom had seconds. I had seconds. We all unknowingly devoured a dog together like some suburban Donner party. Needless to say, I wasn't invited back for a long time. Every Christmas, Mia's family sends a holiday card with Bear's face on it. The first one had "in loving memory" on it. The rest have just been his goofy picture with captions like "thinking of you, always and gone but never forgotten," smiley face, and last year's said "best meal ever." Woof. So yeah. That's the time I tried to impress my girlfriend's dad by slow roasting his dead dog. Moral of the story, label your frozen meat. So this happened about a year ago, and I've been living with the consequences ever since. Buckle up, because it gets weirder the deeper we go. It started, as most tragic tales do, with a girl. Her name was Laura. I met her at a trivia night at my local bar, where I was absolutely destroying the competition with my encyclopedic knowledge of Nicolas Cage movies. She came up to me afterward and said, "You're either really smart or completely unhinged." I replied with, "Why not both?" and that's how I got her number. Laura was one of those effortlessly cool people. She worked at an animal sanctuary, rode a motorcycle, drank black coffee with no sugar, and had a sleeve of tattoos all themed around endangered animals. I, on the other hand, worked from home doing IT support for a mid-sized insurance company, had exactly one succulent that I'd almost killed twice, and got anxiety from buying socks at Target. Still, we hit it off. We went on a few dates, and I was really into her. But I could tell she was looking for someone who lived life on the edge, someone who had stories. So when she mentioned that her ex-boyfriend used to rescue exotic reptiles and almost got arrested in Indonesia, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I pretended I was into reptiles, too. I told her I had a thing for lizards. That I used to breed geckos. That I had connections. I have no idea why I said it. Maybe because I was 3 whiskeys in, maybe because she looked at me like I was finally interesting, but I doubled down. She was stoked and said she'd always wanted to see a Mexican alligator lizard in person. So I said I knew a guy who could get one. I did not know a guy. I Googled a guy. After 2 hours on reptile forums and the darker corners of the web, I actually found someone. Let's call him Reptile Rick. Rick had a sketchy but functioning website and advertised rare and exotic species, no questions asked. He had the exact lizard Laura had mentioned. I emailed him. He replied in 10 minutes with just, cash only. No paper trail. You sure you know what you're doing? Reader, I did not. I met him in a Walmart parking lot on a Thursday at 2 a.m. He handed me a small wooden box that looked like it was used to transport cursed objects in horror movies. Inside was a single bright green lizard that blinked at me like it was judging every life choice I'd made. I paid him $500 in cash, which I'd withdrawn in weird increments over 2 weeks so my bank wouldn't flag it. I took the lizard home, set up a terrarium, thanks, YouTube, and invited Laura over. She was ecstatic. Said she hadn't seen one outside of a rescue center. She took about 100 photos, asked a million questions I had to bluff my way through, and then, plot twist, she posted the photos to her Instagram with the caption, "My man pulled strings to get me a high-risk lizard." Conservation through love. That was my second mistake. Apparently, the Mexican alligator lizard is protected under CITES laws and is very illegal to possess without permits. And her post? It went semi-viral among the animal rights crowd. I started getting DMs from conservationists, questions about where I got the lizard, and even one request for a pairing opportunity. I freaked out and set my account to private. But the real horror started a week later when I came home to find 2 men sitting on my front porch. They were not police. They were not animal control. They were not friendly. They said they were colleagues of Rick and heard I was getting into the trade. Apparently, Lara's post had drawn attention not just from conservationists, but from the illegal exotic pet trade network. They thought I was some kind of new player in the game. I panicked and tried to explain it was a misunderstanding. They laughed and said, "Sure it is. You're a natural, man. We need someone like you on the clean side. Got a baby Gila monster that needs rehoming. You in?" I said no. Politely. They didn't like that. Over the next few days, I got text messages from unknown numbers offering me rare animals. Some were aggressive. One guy sent me a picture of a Komodo dragon in a basement and said, "You're either with us or you're prey." I did what any sane person would do. I tried to return the lizard to Rick. He ghosted me. Laura, meanwhile, thought I was a legend. She kept telling people I was off-grid, deep in the reptile scene, and doing important work. I tried to come clean, but every time I hinted that I'd exaggerated, she looked disappointed. So I kept the act going. I even wore more cargo pants. Things hit peak chaos when I got a knock on my door from actual federal wildlife officers. Someone, I assume one of the angry dealers I'd ignored, had tipped them off. They came in with a warrant, confiscated the lizard, my computer, and every vaguely warm rock in my apartment. I wasn't arrested, thank God, but I was hit with a fat fine and mandatory education courses on wildlife trafficking laws. Laura? She ghosted me a week later with a text that said, "You're not who I thought you were." I've since moved to a different city, sold all my cargo pants, and now donate monthly to a reptile sanctuary out of guilt. My friends still call me Lizard King, and my new coworkers think it's because I like the doors, but deep down, I know the truth. I once ruined my life trying to impress a girl with a stolen lizard. And I don't even like reptiles. TIFU by accidentally becoming the face of a secret underground foot fetish club at my workplace, so this happened over the course of the last 6 months, but I only recently found out the full scope of the situation, and I am still mentally reeling. I'm a 28-year-old guy, work in a mid-sized marketing firm, and before all of this started, I was blissfully unaware of how quickly a simple act of kindness could spiral into absolute chaos. It all began innocently. We had a new intern start last fall, Hannah. She was around 22, fresh out of college, super enthusiastic, very artsy, and she was always sketching in a little notebook during lunch breaks. She was also extremely observant, like scary observant. She'd comment on the color of someone's socks or the exact brand of shoes they wore 2 weeks ago. We all joked she had feet radar. In hindsight, we were not wrong. Anyway, one day, it's pouring rain, and I come into the office with soaked shoes and socks. I kick off my shoes at my desk to let them dry and go about my day. Hannah walks by and notices. She stops, points at my feet, and goes, "Hey, those are really unique. You've got like, oddly symmetrical toes." I laugh, a bit uncomfortable, and jokingly say, "Thanks, I've been training them to pose for Calvin Klein ads." That was, apparently, mistake number 1. After that, I noticed she started sketching more during lunch, and once, I caught a glimpse of a page that very clearly featured my feet. I laughed it off, thinking it was some artistic thing. Maybe she was into anatomy, or just practicing. Whatever. I didn't care. Then a few weeks later, she asks me if I'd help her with an art project she was doing for her portfolio. Said she was trying to do a character design sheet and needed references for different body parts. I agreed, because hey, I'm a nice dude and also trying to be supportive of the new intern. So we book a meeting room during lunch, and she brings her sketch pad, some pencils, and a DSLR camera. I'm thinking I'll be doing like, hand poses or facial expressions. Nope. She straight up asks me to take my socks off and sit on the table. I'm caught off guard, but she plays it cool and explains it's just so she can capture foot posture for a comic she's developing. At this point, I still think it's just some quirky art student thing. So there I am, half sitting on this office table, shirt and tie still on, barefoot like a clown, while this intern snaps like 30 photos of my feet from different angles. I thought that would be the end of it. Fast forward a few months, Hannah finishes her internship, leaves the company, and all seems back to normal. Or so I believed. Then, weird things start happening. I start getting random DMs on Instagram from accounts with usernames like ToBeanKing and SymmetrySeeker88. They're complimenting my feet. Specific compliments, like "love the way your second toe aligns with your arch." Creepy as hell. I ignore them, block the accounts, and change my profile to private. But it gets worse. One day, during a routine team meeting, our HR manager, Karen, pulls me aside and asks if I've been involved in any content creation outside the company that might reflect poorly on our image. I'm baffled. She shows me a printed-out screenshot of a private Discord server someone had leaked. It's titled Soulmate Society, and apparently, it's some weird, niche foot fetish community. The kicker? The pinned posts include high-res pictures of my feet from that office photo shoot. With captions. Captions. One said, "Exhibit A, the golden ratio incarnate." Another had a Photoshop of my feet on Michelangelo's David. To my absolute horror, this community had grown to over 3,000 members. People were analyzing the curvature of my heel like it was a fine wine. There were inside jokes, memes, fan art. Someone made a short comic about Lord Archibald, a heroic figure based on me, who travels barefoot across kingdoms converting non-believers with the gospel of the soul. Turns out, Hannah had uploaded the photos to this group as part of some joke or attempt to impress the community. Apparently, she'd been a long-time member and had quietly been documenting prime specimens in the wild. I was her masterpiece. HR wasn't mad exactly, just deeply uncomfortable. I wasn't in trouble, but they recommended I take a few days off to process everything. I was too embarrassed to even argue. During my time off, I tried to clean up my digital footprint. But the internet is forever. The photos had been screenshotted, shared, enhanced, and even AI upscaled. I found a subreddit entirely dedicated to Mystery Office Foot Guy. The top post had over 12,000 upvotes. When I came back to work, everything was different. People gave me looks. Some smirks. Some sympathetic. My boss started wearing socks with sandals every day, I think as a show of ironic support. My nickname on Slack became Archibald. Eventually, things calmed down. I've since started wearing the most aggressively boring shoes I can find, and I haven't taken them off in public since. I've become almost irrationally paranoid about anyone with a sketchbook. Every now and then, I'll get a package with no return address. Inside? A single pair of toe rings. One even came with a handwritten note, to the one true soul. I moved apartments last month. I didn't leave a forwarding address. TIFU by pretending to be an art expert on a first date and accidentally becoming a guest lecturer at a modern art museum, so I, 32M, matched with this woman named Mia, 29F, on a dating app. She's cool, witty, and clearly out of my league, but I guess I managed to be just the right amount of charming for her to agree to a date. She mentioned she was super into modern art, and I, like the absolute moron I am, pretended I was too. See, I'm not totally clueless. I know a Monet from a Manet, and I've been dragged through enough museums on family trips to recognize a few famous names. But modern art? That's where I draw a complete blank. Pollock? Kandinsky? I thought Dadaism was a meme format until 2 weeks ago. Anyway, Mia suggests we meet at the local modern art museum for our first date. I agree because I'm a dumbass who'd rather lie than admit I'm a Philistine. I think to myself, how hard can it be? Just nod thoughtfully and say things like evocative and juxtaposition. Easy. Day of the date comes, and I pregame the museum visit with a crash course in modern art via YouTube and a few Wikipedia rabbit holes. I memorize a few key phrases like emotional abstraction, spatial dissonance, and existential tension. I feel like I've got just enough buzzwords to fake it for an hour. We meet at the museum. Mia looks amazing, and I'm trying not to sweat through my jacket. She's clearly excited and starts asking me about my favorite movements and artists. I panic and blurt out something about being deeply moved by the minimalism of Rothko's early phase. I don't even know if Rothko had an early phase. She nods, impressed. I'm in. We walk around, and I'm doing my best impression of a tortured intellectual. I stare at a red canvas for like 2 full minutes before saying, this piece is haunting in its simplicity. It makes the absence of form feel louder than form itself. I have no idea what I just said. Mia actually gasps and says, that's such a beautiful way of putting it. Then the foo happens. There's this group of older folks nearby who overhear me wax poetic about a pile of bricks arranged in a corner. It's literally just bricks. I squint, rub my chin, and say, this installation challenges the viewer's understanding of permanence in architecture. It's less about the structure and more about the memory of construction. I'm pretty proud of that one. That's when one of the group members, an elderly man in a tweed blazer, approaches me and says, excuse me, are you one of the visiting lecturers? I start to say no, but Mia blurts out, oh. He studied art history at Columbia. I had, in fact, told her that in our DMs. I was lying. He smiles and says, wonderful. Would you mind giving our group a brief interpretation of this piece? We're part of a senior learning circle from the university. I look at Mia, expecting her to bail me out, but she looks so proud and gives me an encouraging nod. I die a little inside, but I nod and say, of course. Because I am a certified idiot. For the next 15 minutes, I lead a group of 12 retirees through the west wing of the museum, making up increasingly absurd interpretations of various exhibits. I call a pile of twisted metal an allegory of industrial decay post-capitalist collapse. I refer to a blank canvas as the silence of postmodern nihilism. They eat it up. Mia is glowing, clearly impressed by how passionate I am. The elderly group is nodding thoughtfully, taking notes. I start to sweat harder. And then comes the real kicker. The museum's actual curator, a very tall, very serious woman named Dr. Melendez, approaches us as I'm describing a sculpture of what looks like melted plastic chairs. I'm mid-sentence, something about the deconstruction of domestic identity, when she interrupts and asks, are you leading an unscheduled tour? I try to diffuse the situation with a chuckle and say, just a spontaneous walk and talk, you know? A casual debrief. She looks at me for a long moment, then glances at the senior group, who start applauding me for my brilliant insights. Now, here's where things get completely out of control. Dr. Melendez doesn't yell or scold me. Instead, she says, "We've actually had some cancellations for our Thursday panel on interpreting modernity. Would you be willing to participate?" I freeze. I look at Mia. She's nodding enthusiastically. I hear myself say, "I'd be honored." That was 3 days ago. Thursday comes, and I am sitting on a panel in front of about 70 people in an auditorium, next to 2 actual professors and an avant-garde installation artist who once lived in a tree for 8 months as a statement. I'm sweating through my button-down. Each panelist gives a short talk. Mine is 10 minutes of pure improvisational nonsense. I call modern art a necessary rupture from the tyranny of realism. I quote philosophers I've never read. I say the word liminal no less than 6 times. The audience claps. Mia claps. Dr. Melendez claps. Afterward, I get invited to join a monthly discussion group and receive a voucher for a free museum membership. One of the professors gives me his card and says he'd love to collaborate. I still haven't told Mia I'm not actually an art historian. We've gone on 4 dates now. She invited me to her friend's gallery opening next weekend. I am currently speed reading art since 1900 and trying to memorize at least 3 actual artists per movement so I can survive whatever surreal test the universe throws at me next. Please, for the love of Rothko, someone tell me how to gracefully admit I am a fraud without losing this amazing woman and becoming a walking meme in the local arts community. Or at least how to fake it a little longer. TIFU by trying to surprise my long-distance girlfriend with a spontaneous visit, and ruining her marriage proposal. For context, my girlfriend, let's call her Sarah, and I had been doing long distance for about 2 years. We met during a summer internship, hit it off, and despite living in different cities 800 miles apart, we decided to give it a shot. Surprisingly, it worked. Frequent calls, visits every couple of months, and a lot of shared gaming nights kept the spark alive. Sarah had been hinting for months about taking the next step in our relationship. Every once in a while, she'd drop these not-so-subtle hints about what kind of engagement ring would I like, or she'd say things like, "If we ever lived together, what would you cook for dinner?" That sort of thing. I always smiled and joked my way around it, partially because I loved the dynamic we had, and partially because I honestly didn't think she'd be the one to actually propose. That brings us to last weekend. It had been about 6 weeks since we'd last seen each other, and I missed her like hell. I'd had a rough week, car trouble, stress at work, my apartment flooded slightly from a busted pipe, and I just needed a win. So I decided to book a flight and surprise her for the weekend. No heads up, no clues, just a pop-in romantic gesture like in the movies. I even planned to bring her favorite snacks and wear this ridiculous "I flew 800 miles to see you" t-shirt I had custom printed overnight. I thought I was being adorable. I arrived in her city around noon on Saturday. She lived in a gated apartment complex, but I had been there so many times that the security guy kind of recognized me and let me through with a nod. I walked up to her unit, heart pounding, snacks in hand, and rang the doorbell, expecting a squeal of joy. No answer. I figured maybe she was at the grocery store or out for a walk. I texted her casually, "What are you up to today?" to feel things out, and she replied almost immediately, "Just a chill Saturday. Laundry and cleaning." You? Ah. So she was home. Interesting. I rang the doorbell again. No answer. Now, I wasn't about to get mad or suspicious. I assumed she just had music on or was vacuuming or something. I knew the code to the side gate that leads to her patio door. I figured I'd knock on the sliding glass door like a goof and surprise her from the back. As I turned the corner to her patio, I saw the sliding door was open. I stopped dead in my tracks when I heard voices, hers and a few others. Laughter. Music playing softly. I slowly stepped forward, careful not to make a sound. And then I saw it. Her living room was decorated with fairy lights, candles, and rose petals. I stood frozen on the edge of the patio, just behind the curtain, peeking in like a stalker. My brain tried to catch up with what I was seeing. She was dressed up, wearing a dress I'd never seen before. Her friends were standing around, holding phones up like they were recording something. One friend held a small whiteboard that said "Say yes." And then Sarah dropped to one knee. My heart punched my lungs. Standing in front of her was me. Sort of. Let me explain. It was a cardboard cutout. Of me. A full-size, ridiculous-looking cardboard cutout she had apparently printed from one of my Facebook photos, where I'm holding a cat and wearing sunglasses and a dumb expression. Everyone in the room was grinning like idiots as she gave this adorable speech to cardboard me, saying how much I meant to her, how our time apart had only made her love me more, and how she wanted to close the distance forever. She proposed to a piece of cardboard. And here I was, actual me, standing outside like an extra in my own life. I panicked. Not knowing what to do, I instinctively stepped back, tripped on one of the potted plants on her patio, and knocked it over. Loudly. Everyone turned. Sarah's face dropped when she saw me. Like, really dropped. Her mouth opened slightly, as if her brain just couldn't process the two versions of me, cardboard and human, existing simultaneously. One of her friends, holding a phone, whispered, "Oh my God, is this part of the plan?" "No, Karen. No, it's not." Sarah stood up slowly and walked toward me. I just kind of stood there, wide-eyed, still holding the damn snacks and wearing that stupid shirt. She pushed open the sliding door and stared at me, completely speechless. After about 5 seconds of awkward silence, I blurted, "Surprise?" I thought it would land as charming or funny, maybe even salvageable. It was not. She looked absolutely horrified. She pulled me inside, away from her friends, and whispered sharply, "What the hell are you doing here?" "I wanted to surprise you," I said, still trying to smile. Her eyes welled up, not with joy, but with panic. This was supposed to be my surprise. I planned this for weeks. I had everything timed. You were going to get a package in the mail on Monday with a QR code that led to the video of this proposal, and a plane ticket for you to move here. This whole thing was supposed to be perfect. Now I was horrified. We both just stood there for a while, realizing that we'd basically ruined each other's plans in the most cinematic way possible. Her friends awkwardly left one by one after realizing this wasn't part of the plan, and I ended up sitting on the couch with her, eating the snacks I brought and watching her proposal video on her phone, with the cardboard me standing silently in the corner like a confused ghost. We eventually talked it out, cried a little, laughed a little, and decided it was kind of fitting for our weird, chaotic love story. She proposed again. For real this time. To the real me. No cameras. No candles. Just us. I said yes. But good Lord. I still have the cutout in my apartment. My friends call him Flat Chad. This happened last week and I still don't know if I'll have a job by Monday. I'm a mid-level IT guy at a mid-sized tech firm. Not a glamorous job, but it pays the bills, and I get to work on some cool stuff when they let me out of the ticket mines. For months, we've been preparing for the launch of a new AR/VR headset. It's a big deal for the company, first physical product we've made, tons of money thrown into R&D, marketing, influencer campaigns, the whole circus. Our CEO, Dana, is this intense, visionary type who's been calling this launch her moon landing in every press meeting. You get the picture. So when launch day came around, the office was transformed into this sleek black and neon demo space with LED strips everywhere, VR pods set up, food trucks outside, and influencers with ring lights and sponsored hoodies walking around like they owned the place. Everything was live-streamed. We had cameras in every corner, and everything was choreographed down to the second. My role that day was pretty straightforward: be on standby in the server room to monitor network stability and make sure the back end for the live demos didn't die under pressure. Pretty simple. I actually brought snacks and figured I'd catch up on some work or maybe even stream something while pretending to be mission control. What I didn't know, what no one told me, was that the room had just gotten an upgraded fire suppression system the week before. New server racks had gone in, so they put in this fancy clean agent gas system designed to starve fires of oxygen without damaging electronics. Sounds great in theory. In practice? A death trap for the socially oblivious. Now here's where the actual up begins. Around an hour into the event, one of the VR demo rigs starts throwing errors. People are whispering in walkie-talkies, and I get a Slack ping from one of the engineers. Can you check on the Rack 3 router? Might be overheating. So I grab my badge, walk into the server room, and holy hell, it's hot in there. Like really hot. The AC unit's running, but I can feel this weird warm pocket in the back corner. I grab a thermal scanner just to be sure, and yeah, one of the routers is way above optimal temp. Probably a dust issue or a cooling fan failure. I lean over to get a closer look and, being the genius I am, set my coffee down on top of a nearby cabinet. That's when I knock it over. And not just onto the floor. The mug bounces and slams into this stupid, bright red thing under the cabinet. Turns out, it's a manual release for the fire suppression system, some kind of backup switch in case the automatic sensors fail. My coffee hits it just right, and click. At first, I hear this soft hiss, like a can of soda being opened. Then there's this low hump as the gas floods the room. It takes all of 2 seconds before I can't breathe. The lights cut to emergency red. An alarm I didn't even know existed starts blaring. I stumble out of the server room coughing and blinking like I just got pepper sprayed, and slam the door behind me. Now remember, this entire building is wired for the live stream. And wouldn't you know it, one of the internal security cams is right outside the server room. So the main feed suddenly cuts from a beautiful demo of a guy slicing virtual fruit in VR to me, red-faced, stumbling out of a foggy room like I just hotboxed the server with poison gas. Within seconds, chaos. The stream feed goes black. The demo rigs lose connection. Half the lights in the room flicker. Someone yells, "Is this part of the experience?" And one of the influencers actually keeps filming, thinking it's a stunt. Meanwhile, Dana storms over to me, eyes wide, screaming something I can't hear because my ears are still ringing. I try to explain, but all I can say is router overheating and point vaguely toward the foggy door like a moron. The suppression gas vents within 10 minutes, but the damage is done. 2 routers fried. Several systems went into emergency shutdown. The stream was down for almost 20 minutes. Worst of all, one of the execs, this big-time investor, got stuck inside a VR rig that froze mid-demo, and apparently he gets panic attacks. He was crying and flailing inside the headset until someone yanked it off him. Dana calls an emergency meeting that night. I honestly thought I was getting fired then and there. But she's too busy doing damage control with PR and logistics to even look at me. I've never felt more like a ghost. I spent the rest of the evening helping restore systems, apologizing to everyone I passed, and physically scrubbing coffee out of the server room floor while trying not to cry in front of my intern. That was Thursday. Friday, I was put on special assignment, which basically means sit in this office and wait for HR to decide if they need a scapegoat. I've been checking Slack and email obsessively ever since. Radio silence. My badge still works, but that might just be because they forgot to deactivate it. The worst part? The suppression system didn't even need to go off. There was no fire. The heat issue was due to someone plugging too many demo units into a single power strip. A simple fan or circuit reset would have fixed it. And now there's a whole department memo going out about unauthorized beverages in equipment zones, with a photo of my poor coffee mug included. They even gave it a name in the thread, the cup that killed launch day. So yeah. TIFU by launching our moon landing straight into the sun. So this happened last weekend, and I'm still processing the social catastrophe I managed to unleash upon myself. Let me start by saying I have social anxiety. Not the quirky kind where I just prefer texting, no, the kind where I rehearse saying hi in my head for 30 minutes and still mess it up. So when I was invited to a funeral by a friend of mine, Dave, I was already a bundle of nerves. I hadn't known the deceased very well, just that he was Dave's uncle, and I had met him maybe once or twice at barbecues over the years. The funeral was being held at a church downtown. I Google mapped the address Dave texted me, dressed in my only black suit, that still kinda fits from a wedding 3 years ago, and showed up early to avoid walking in late and being that guy. When I arrived, I noticed the parking lot was more full than I expected. I figured Dave had a big family. I walked inside, nodded respectfully at a few people standing in the lobby, and took a seat toward the back. Everything seemed normal at first, somber music, floral arrangements, a big portrait of an older man at the front of the room. I didn't recognize the guy, but people age weird sometimes, and I wasn't going to stare too hard. The service started, and here's where things got weird. The priest referred to the deceased as Mr. Harold Klein. Dave's uncle was named Richard. My stomach dropped. I pulled out my phone and double-checked the text from Dave. I'd fat-fingered the street name into my GPS and ended up at a completely different funeral, that started at the exact same time. Here's where any rational person would have quietly stood up and left. Not me. I sat frozen in my seat, calculating that sneaking out now would be even more awkward and disrespectful. I told myself I'd just stay through the service, slip out at the end, and no one would be the wiser. Except then they called for pallbearers. Now, I'm not a family member. I'm not even a family friend. I'm not even a stranger who knew Harold. I am, at best, a guy who took a wrong turn. But as the family stood and the priest looked around, a woman in front of me, possibly Harold's daughter, turned and said, "Would you mind helping us? We're short one." I panicked. I nodded. So now I'm standing with 5 strangers, being handed gloves and getting briefed on how to carry the casket. I think I blacked out for a full minute. My brain was just screaming, "What are you doing?" but my body kept moving. The worst part? I ended up at the front left of the casket, prime real estate. The guy next to me, a mountain of a man who could have benched Harold with one arm, gave me a firm nod like we were brothers in grief. I nodded back, trying to look solemn, not I'm committing a felony level guilty. We carried the casket to the hearse, and I genuinely almost cried, not from emotion, but from the physical and existential weight of what I was doing. Afterward, they invited everyone to a reception at a nearby hall. I wanted to run, disappear into the shadows, maybe change my name and start over in a new state. But guess what? I made eye contact with the lady from earlier who asked me to help. She walked over, thanked me profusely, said, "You were such a blessing today." I nodded again, the only move I had left in my social playbook. So I went to the reception of a man I never met. I ate tiny sandwiches. I drank lukewarm coffee. I hugged 2 people. At one point, someone told a story about Harold wrestling a raccoon off his back porch, and I laughed, too loudly. I got a few stares, but by now I was committed. I had become part of Harold's posthumous circle of love and support. Then I saw the real kicker. Dave had texted me again, asking where I was. I made up some excuse about traffic, finally bailed on Harold's reception with a polite wave, and drove 5 blocks over to the actual funeral, arriving just in time to catch the tail end of the graveside ceremony. Dave greeted me with a hug and said, "Glad you could make it." I said, "Me too." No one ever needs to know that I carried the wrong man to his final resting place, held the hand of his grieving widow, and signed the guest book with my real name and a heartfelt message. Rest in peace, Harold. You seemed like a great guy. Hey, friends. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. This happened a couple of months ago and I'm only just starting to fully process it. It started as a normal New Year's resolution: quit vaping. I'd been going through 2 pods a day, my lungs felt like burnt cotton candy, and my bank account hated me. So on January 1st, I flushed all my stuff down the toilet in a dramatic, movie-worthy purge and vowed to reclaim my lungs. Day 1 was hell. Day 2 was worse. By day 4 I was ready to wrestle a raccoon for a puff of menthol. So I did what any desperate, overstimulated millennial would do: I googled support groups for quitting nicotine. That's where I found the group. It had a wholesome-looking website. A blurry photo of a circle of chairs. A dove logo. Some testimonials that sounded real enough. The group was called Breathe Clear, which sounded legit and kind of beautiful. They met on Wednesdays in the basement of a Unitarian church about 10 minutes from my apartment. No fees, no sign-ups, just show up and breathe clear. I walked in jittery, already sweating through my hoodie. There were about a dozen people, all standing in a semicircle, arms out like they were about to hug the air. Everyone turned to look at me like they'd been expecting me. A woman who looked like someone's art teacher walked over and said, "You made it." That's brave. I was too fried to question it. I nodded and joined the circle. We did breathing exercises. It was weirdly soothing. Someone handed me a lukewarm herbal tea that tasted like moss and sadness, but I drank it anyway. We talked about temptation, about resisting the burn, about letting go of chemical shadows. A bit new agey, but fine. I figured this was just part of the deal. The leader's name was Owen. Bald, bearded, barefoot. Spoke like he was narrating a documentary about whales. He had that magnetic cult leader calm, but I just assumed he was one of those yoga dads who meditates through traffic. He said stuff like, "The breath is truth. The breath is the only master." Again, weird, but I didn't care. I hadn't vaped in 4 days and I wasn't trying to jinx it. The meetings got more intense over the next few weeks. We started wearing white during sessions. Owen burned incense that smelled like hot pennies. We did group chants. They gave me a spiritual name, Hrothgar. No idea why. I asked once and was told, "You'll remember when you're ready." I still didn't think it was a cult. Then came the retreat. It was positioned as a weekend getaway, free of charge, to reconnect with your pure, unvaped self. I was told we'd do deep breath work, eat clean food, and finally shed the tarsal. Again, still sounded like hippie nonsense, but at this point, I was 3 weeks vape-free and feeling like I could bench press God. I went. It was in the middle of nowhere. The only directions were GPS coordinates and follow the path when the asphalt ends. We had to leave our phones in a basket at the entrance. Red flag? For sure. But I was buzzing off herbal confidence and kale energy, so I handed mine over like a champ. That weekend was intense. First, we weren't allowed to speak unless spoken to by someone of spiral rank. Yes, they had a rank system, based on breath retention times. I was a wind cub. Owen was elder lung. Second, the food was literally just raw vegetables and a broth that tasted like someone boiled sadness and twigs. Third, there was this ceremony called the exhalation, where we stood in a circle and screamed out our final puff. People were crying, hyperventilating, someone threw up. Owen blessed us with eucalyptus oil and said, "You are now vapor-free. You are now real." At this point, I was thinking, okay, maybe this is slightly cultish, but still, I hadn't vaped. I was clearer than I'd ever been. And honestly, I felt like I belonged. Everyone was really, really nice. Like, too nice. Like, if I said I was cold, 3 people would immediately try to knit me a sweater from moss and rabbit fur. It all started to fall apart on the final night of the retreat. We were sitting around a bonfire, silently chewing on celery sticks like guilt-ridden rabbits, when Owen stood up and said, "Tomorrow, we breathe forever." No one flinched. Except me. Because what the hell does that mean? I raised my hand and asked for clarification, casually trying not to sound like I was reevaluating all my life choices. Owen smiled like I'd just said something adorably naive and said, "To be breath is to leave the body behind. The lungs are a cage. Tomorrow, we unshackle." Now, I am not the brightest crayon in the box, but I do know that when someone says we're going to leave the body behind, that's not just metaphorical yoga speak anymore. That's a problem, so I did what any reasonable, terrified, potentially cult member would do. I faked explosive diarrhea. I told the spiral-ranked overseer assigned to my sleeping hut that the raw kale hadn't sat well and I was going to purge toxins violently in the woods. He nodded, gave me a ginger root for the journey, and I bolted the second he turned around. I sprinted down the gravel path, barefoot, freezing, and very much reevaluating my entire understanding of herbal teas and trust. After about 20 minutes of running through branches and regret, I finally hit asphalt and flagged down a passing UPS truck. The driver, bless him, didn't even ask questions. I must have looked like Tom Hanks halfway through Cast Away. He drove me back to town, gave me his hoodie, and told me to never trust anyone who says the word cleanse more than twice in a sentence. I didn't vape that night. Or the night after. Or the week after. But I did report Breathe Clear to the authorities, who apparently had already been investigating them for 2 years under a different name, the Breatharians. So yeah. I'm vape-free. But every time I see someone in all white doing deep breathing, my fight or flight kicks in and I start scanning for the nearest ginger root. Moral of the story, quit vaping, but maybe don't do it through an unlicensed forest breath cult. TIFU by pretending to be fluent in Japanese to impress a girl, and ending up on live TV during a national broadcast in Japan. Let me preface this by saying I do not speak Japanese. At all. Like, maybe a couple words from anime and a few phrases I learned from Duolingo 2 years ago when I had a brief motivation kick. But I was in a weird headspace when this all started, and things spiraled so far out of control that I'm still recovering from the social shrapnel. About 2 months ago, I was on a work trip to Tokyo. It was a short tech conference gig for the company I work for. I'm in cybersecurity, and they asked if I'd be willing to go since I had traveled internationally before and had a friendly face. So, sure. Why not? On the flight over, I was seated next to this beautiful woman in her late 20s. Let's call her Hannah. She was Japanese-American, born in Osaka, but had spent most of her life in LA and was visiting family. We hit it off right away, chatted about travel, music, work. At some point, she casually asked if I spoke Japanese. Now, here's where the brain worms kicked in. Instead of saying, "Not really," I said, "Yeah, I speak a bit." She smiled and switched into Japanese, and I panicked. She said something like, "I had no idea at the time," and I, smiling like a moron, nodded and gave a very confident hi. And that was the beginning of the lie. We spent the rest of the flight talking, mostly in English, thankfully, and exchanged contacts. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. Just a harmless little white lie. But she followed up the next day, invited me out to meet some of her friends in Shibuya, and of course I said yes. 1 drink in, she told her friends that I spoke Japanese pretty well. Cue all of them lighting up in rapid fire asking me questions I couldn't even begin to parse. What did I do? I pulled out my phone and said I needed to check a message. Then I downloaded Google Translate faster than I've ever installed an app in my life. For the next hour, I managed to survive by playing the role of the shy but modest speaker who only understood when people spoke slowly. They bought it. Here's where it escalates to a nightmarish level. One of Hannah's friends, let's call him Kenji, turned out to work for a local TV station. He was producing a segment about foreigners in Tokyo for a morning variety show. You can see where this is going. He thought I'd be perfect. A foreign IT specialist who can navigate Tokyo and speak Japanese, what a great example. I tried to politely decline, but they were all so excited and supportive. Even Hannah was like, "You'd be amazing. Don't worry, I'll help you with the script." And I let it happen. The next 2 weeks were a blur of me pretending to prep for this show. Kenji had me film a couple of quick test shots, and every time they asked me something in Japanese, I'd say something vague and redirect. I started watching Japanese news and children's shows every night, trying to memorize useful phrases. I even bought a book called Japanese for Businessmen, which ironically gave me exactly zero help when I most needed it. Then the day of the live segment arrived. It was one of those outdoor interview spots, crowded Shibuya background, flashy intro graphics, upbeat music, the whole 9 yards. I was given a brief cue list of questions and tried to memorize the answers with the help of Google Translate and some online pronunciation guides. The segment started. Kenji was all smiles. I stood beside him, mic clipped to my shirt, smile glued to my face. The host, a bubbly woman in a ridiculous yellow blazer, welcomed viewers and introduced me as John-san, the American tech guy who speaks Japanese fluently. First question, what brings you to Tokyo? Easy. I recited my line like a robot. I came to Tokyo for an IT conference. She nodded. I breathed. Second question, what do you love most about Japanese culture? That one I barely remembered. Something about the food. I choked out a mangled sentence that probably meant the ramen is made of family or something equally insane, based on how the host's face twitched. She laughed, maybe politely, maybe nervously. Kenji smiled. Hannah stood behind the camera looking proud. Then the host went rogue. She asked a follow-up. Something fast, casual, unscripted. I caught none of it. Silence. Everyone looked at me. I panicked and said the only phrase I could think of, "Sorry, one more time please?" She repeated the question, slower. Still nothing. My brain short-circuited. I looked straight into the camera, smiled, and said, "I like Dragon Ball." There was a beat of stunned silence, then the host burst out laughing. So did the cameraman. Kenji's smile froze. Hannah's expression started to melt into horror. And I knew. I was cooked. After the segment ended, Kenji pulled me aside, furious. "You said you were fluent," he hissed. I tried to explain, but the damage was done. Hannah wouldn't even look at me. She left without saying goodbye. I haven't heard from her since. The segment aired the next morning. Turns out it was live, but they still uploaded it to YouTube for the replay crowd. Within a day, it had over 200K views. The title was something like "Funny Foreigner Loves Dragon Ball, Morning Tokyo Laughs." There were memes. People lip-synced my line on TikTok. Someone auto-tuned it into a song. Back home, my coworkers threw a mini viewing party in the break room. I became Dragon Ball guy. Clients asked me about it in meetings. My boss said, "Well, at least you're famous now." I don't go near Japanese food anymore. So yeah. I lied about speaking Japanese to impress a girl, got roped into a live TV segment, exposed myself to the entire country as a fraud, and accidentally became a meme. Don't lie, kids. Especially not on national television. So this happened about a month ago, but the emotional scars are still fresh. I, 29M, have been dating my girlfriend Emily, 27F, for almost 2 years. She's amazing, and I wanted to do something special for our anniversary. Nothing cliché like dinner or flowers, I wanted memorable. I'd heard her talk about how much she missed spontaneous adventures, so I thought, why not plan a surprise weekend getaway? I'd book a cabin in the mountains, pack her a bag, grab her after work, and just go. In theory, that sounds great. In execution? A slow descent into madness. So I start by coordinating with her best friend, Sarah, to make sure Emily doesn't make plans. I book a secluded but beautiful Airbnb in the Blue Ridge Mountains, fireplace, hot tub, the works. I even call her boss to secretly arrange time off. I'm operating at a god-tier level of surprise planning. I feel like a romance ninja. The day arrives. I finish work early, pick up the keys to the cabin, and head to Emily's house to pack a bag for her. Based on a packing list I sneakily built over weeks of passive observation and one very suspicious "what would you pack if you had to run away" with no warning conversation. Now here's where the wheels start falling off. Emily recently moved in with her grandma while saving for a house. I'd been to the house a few times, but never really internalized the layout. I knew she worked late that day, so I figured I'd sneak in, pack the bag quickly, and surprise her at work with the car running and a playlist ready. I get to the house and knock. No answer. Perfect. I know where the spare key is, under a ceramic frog, naturally, so I let myself in, calling out softly, "Hey." Just me. No response. I tiptoe upstairs, find her room, and start packing a bag. All smooth sailing. I even find her favorite fuzzy socks. I'm feeling confident. Too confident. As I'm zipping the bag, I hear a creak behind me. I turn, and there's this small figure in a bathrobe and slippers standing in the doorway. It's dark. I panic. They scream. I scream louder. She grabs the lamp and starts yelling something about Satan. I realize it's Grandma. So I do what any logical adult would do in this situation. I flee. I grab the bag, bolt past her, mutter something like it's okay. I'm a friend, and run out the door like a burglar who just stole a laptop and some fuzzy socks. Now the smart thing would have been to stop there. To call Emily, explain what happened, and laugh it off. I did not do that. In my panic, I decide that the best way to make this okay is to go pick up Emily anyway, explain the surprise, and come back with her to smooth things over. I get to her office, wait outside until she finishes, and call her over excitedly. She sees the packed bag in my passenger seat and gasps. "What's this?" I go full rom-com mode. "Surprise weekend getaway. I packed for you. You deserve a break. Let's go." She's shocked, thrilled. Kisses me. It's all very movie montage worthy. Until her phone rings. It's her mom. Emily puts it on speaker while smiling at me, still unaware of the horror brewing. "Emily, it's your grandmother. She's at the police station. She says someone broke into the house, screamed at her, and fled with one of your bags. She thinks she was almost kidnapped." My soul leaves my body. I watch the joy on Emily's face drain like a sink full of heartbreak. Wait. What? What bag? I slowly turn and point to the duffel in the back seat. Emily's eyes go wide. "You went into the house." So we drive straight to the police station, where Grandma is giving a statement and describing me as a hooded figure with eyes full of sin. I'm standing there in khakis and a Patagonia fleece, trying to explain that I'm not, in fact, a satanic burglar, but rather a hopeless romantic with no concept of personal boundaries. Grandma does not find this charming. The officer listening to the statement is clearly trying not to laugh. He keeps looking between me and Emily like we're some kind of reality TV episode. After a lot of explaining, ID checking, and apologizing, they agree not to press charges, but I'm warned, very clearly, that breaking and entering is still a crime, even if it's for love. Emily is furious, mortified, and also low-key impressed. She tells me she needs time to process, which I completely understand. The worst part? The cabin was non-refundable. So I spend the weekend alone in the romantic getaway I planned for two, soaking in a hot tub and drinking wine straight from the bottle while texting periodic apologies and grandma memes. Fast forward to now, Emily and I are still together, somehow. We laugh about it now, but only because Grandma eventually forgave me after I mowed her lawn for 6 weeks and bought her a weighted blanket and a world's coolest Nana mug. Every time we go on a trip now, Emily triple checks that I haven't accidentally committed a felony in preparation. To sum up, I tried to surprise my girlfriend. I traumatized her grandmother. Almost got arrested. Lost $500 on a hot tub weekend alone. And learned a very important lesson about communication and boundaries. Romance ninja? More like emotional damage samurai. TIFU by getting a job at my girlfriend's dad's company and accidentally sending a very explicit email to the entire executive board, including him. So a few months ago, my girlfriend of 2 years, Emily, convinced me to apply for a job at her dad's company. He's the CFO of this fairly large mid-sized tech firm, and they had an opening in their marketing department. I wasn't in love with my current gig, and the pay here was better. She vouched for me, her dad gave a thumbs up after a very dadly interview, and I got the job. At first, things were great. The work was interesting, my coworkers were decent, and I was feeling like maybe I had finally found a place where I could grow professionally. But I quickly discovered 2 things. 1, their internal email system was a clunky nightmare, and 2, there was a very weird, very over-the-top culture of fun at this company. Think we're a family vibes mixed with forced karaoke Fridays and dress as your favorite SaaS product day. Now, about a month in, the marketing team was working on this massive rebranding campaign. We had meetings almost daily, and there were Google Docs flying everywhere. In a moment of cockiness or stupidity, I still don't know, I created a rough draft for a video script on my own time and emailed it to my team to show some initiative. Only I didn't email it to just my team. Let me back up and explain something that will become relevant. My girlfriend and I have a shared Gmail account. Not for serious stuff. It's mostly used for dumb things like shared Spotify playlists, our vacation planning, or sending each other memes during work hours. And sometimes, spicy stuff. Like, here's what I want to do to you when I get home kind of emails. That morning, before leaving for work, Emily and I had exchanged some very NSFW messages on that account. We were doing a little role-playing over email, don't judge. It was a whole fantasy thing involving me as her dominant professor and her as a naughty grad student who needed a good grade. I wrote some, let's say extremely detailed scenarios. Like, 3 paragraphs of explicit detail detailed. So later that day, I draft the script for the company video, and when I go to email it to my marketing team, I have a brain fart of biblical proportions. Because I was still logged into the shared Gmail tab from earlier, I opened a new email and typed marketing team into the to field, but Gmail autocomplete picked the internal mailing list named Marketing Executives plus Board. I didn't double-check. Even worse, instead of attaching the script, I accidentally attached the last thing I had copied into my clipboard, which was a draft of the sexy email I had written to Emily that morning. The one where I described, in exquisite detail, how I would bend her over my desk and give her an A+4 extra credit. I hit send. I remember getting that little whoosh sound Gmail makes when the message goes out, and immediately feeling like something was off. I glanced again at the to field. Marketing Executives plus Board. I stared at the screen, blood draining from my face. Then I opened the attachment. There it was. In black and white. No context. Just 3 pages of me being the horniest Shakespeare that ever lived, referring to myself as Professor Thunderstaff and talking about how lateness must be punished by oral exams. I have never sprinted so fast across an office in my life. I ran to my boss's office, who thankfully was cool but very surprised, and tried to explain. I was sweating, rambling, my words made 0 sense. He just said, I think you should go home for the day. Which I did. Now here's the real horror. The email went to my boss, the entire executive marketing team, the board of directors, Emily's dad, yes. Her dad. The man who literally gave me this job. About 2 hours after I got home, Emily came storming into the apartment holding her phone, saying, what the actual hell did you send to my dad? Apparently, the board was in a meeting when the email came through. Several people opened it thinking it was important. Her dad read the entire thing before realizing it was not, in fact, a pitch for a new marketing campaign, but a vividly written piece of soft-core erotica starring his daughter. I have never, in my entire existence, wished so hard to just stop existing. Not even die. Just vanish. Delete me from the timeline. To his credit, Emily's dad never contacted me directly. I heard from HR the next day. It was, quote, strongly recommended that I resign voluntarily. I didn't even argue. I just sent the shortest resignation email of all time and ghosted that place. Emily and I are still together, somehow, but things were very tense for a while. I've been permanently banned from ever applying to any company her father is affiliated with. Also, Emily's mom apparently heard about the email and told her book club. So yeah, my fictional alter ego Professor Thunderstaff is now a bit of a legend among a group of wine-drunk suburban moms. In the end, I learned a valuable lesson: never sext from shared emails, always double-check your recipients, and maybe don't write erotica with your real name at the top of the page. But mostly, just never work for your girlfriend's dad. So this happened about 4 months ago, and I've only now mustered the courage to put it into words. For context, I, 26M, work in IT support at a large corporate office building downtown. We're talking multiple departments, thousands of employees, and a whole lot of bureaucracy. It's one of those places where people wear badges with chips in them just to access the bathroom. Now, I had recently developed a massive crush on one of the new hires in marketing. Let's call her Emily. Emily was smart, stylish, and had this laugh that made me forget how to form sentences. Every time she called our department for a computer issue, I leapt at the chance to help, even when the problem was basically, "Have you tried turning it off and on again?" So one Friday afternoon, she comes to my desk, panicked. Her laptop won't connect to the server, and she has a huge presentation to give to the VP in 30 minutes. This is my chance. I grab my coffee, throw on my most confident tech bro swagger, and walk with her to the 21st floor like I'm auditioning for a role in Mr. Robot. I sit at her desk, plug in a USB stick with some of my go-to-network troubleshooting tools, harmless scripts, drivers, the usual, and begin working. Except the USB is not the one I thought it was. It was the one I had used for a cybersecurity seminar last year, which contained a test script I wrote, basically a simulated ransomware payload that I designed to scare my friend Josh as a prank during the seminar. I know. The script immediately launches, and within seconds, her screen turns red with a fake ransomware message I had written in my best hacker movie font: "Your files have been encrypted. Send 3 Bitcoin to this address or say goodbye to your data." My heart stops. I pull the USB out like that's going to help. Her jaw drops. I start muttering something about a test environment and "don't worry, it's not real." But before I can explain, the script executes across the network because, get this, I was logged in with admin credentials and she was connected to the internal server. Apparently, the script was set to propagate on the same subnet to demonstrate how fast ransomware spreads in unprotected environments. Within minutes, I'm hearing the unmistakable sound of panicked voices from surrounding cubicles. Monitors are turning red. Phones start ringing. Someone yells, "We're under cyber attack." Now, here's where it goes nuclear. The company has a cybersecurity response protocol. A very aggressive one. Because we handle some sensitive client data, the second any ransomware-like activity is detected, the building's systems initiate lockdown. All doors automatically lock. Elevators stop. An automated announcement plays, "All personnel remain where you are." Emergency protocols are in effect. People think it's real. Someone screams. Someone else starts praying. Emergency lights turn on. The server room literally locks itself, cutting off any attempt I could make to fix it immediately. Meanwhile, I'm still standing at Emily's desk, my face a ghostly shade of panic. She looks at me like I'm the Zodiac killer. Security shows up about 5 minutes later. They ask everyone to step away from computers. They demand to know if anyone saw anything unusual. And that's when Emily, bless her chaotic heart, turns and goes, I think he might have caused it. They escort me to a separate room like I'm some Bond villain. I try to explain that it was an accident, a test script, a leftover file from a seminar. They ask for the USB. I hand it over. They leave me in the room for 3 hours. During this time, my phone dies. I can hear faint echoes of announcements over the PA system. I think I might have peed a little. I'm not proud. Eventually, the head of cybersecurity comes in with the USB in a biohazard-style bag. He's not laughing. He tells me that while the script didn't cause actual damage, it took down several internal systems for hours. The company had to issue a statement to clients. The building had been evacuated. The CEO had called in from out of state, demanding answers. The cops had been contacted until they confirmed it was an internal error. I nearly passed out. I asked if I was fired. He said he'd think about it. I went home that night in a daze, alternating between hysterical laughter and Googling faking your own death and moving to Peru. The next week, I got a final warning on my record and mandatory cybersecurity retraining, which was a joy since I was the one who helped write the original training modules. They also temporarily revoked my admin privileges, meaning I had to ask my coworkers to do things I used to be able to handle myself, like I was a digital toddler. As for Emily, well, she didn't talk to me much after that. I don't blame her. Hard to flirt with someone after they accidentally lock down the building and simulate a cyber attack worthy of a Jason Bourne movie. I still work there. I've since double-checked every USB I own, buried the hacker script in a folder 18 directories deep, and renamed it something like birthday_photos_2015 just so I never touch it again. Every so often, someone brings up the incident, and I go completely still like a dog that heard a firework. Our office now has a full audit process before any external drives can be used. And IT now has a strict no cowboy hero policy, unofficially named after me. So yeah. That's how I tanked any shot I had with Emily, became an urban legend in my company, and taught a 1,000-person corporation the dangers of USBs and unchecked confidence. But hey, at least her laptop connects to the server now. TIFU by accidentally taking my boss's daughter on a date, thinking she was my Tinder match. To set the stage, I, 29M, work for a medium-sized marketing firm. I've been there for about 3 years and have been gunning for a promotion that's been slowly creeping toward me for the last 6 months. My boss, Roger, is one of those clean-shaven, dead serious, no bullshit, no fun, don't speak unless spoken to kind of guys. Think Gordon Ramsay but in khakis and with a silent judgmental glare instead of shouting. The guy terrifies me, but he respects work ethic, so I've done everything to stay in his good graces. I even stopped microwaving fish in the office because I overheard him say it was an abomination. Now to the Tinder part. I matched with someone named Lana on Tinder last week. She looked absolutely gorgeous, hazel eyes, auburn hair, nose ring, the kind of smile that says, I'd laugh at your dumb jokes. Her profile said she was into indie music, dog rescues, and finding the best spicy margarita in the city. We hit it off instantly. Witty banter turned into deep convos, and I started to feel like maybe, just maybe, this one wasn't going to ghost me after 3 days of texting. We made plans to meet on Friday night at a bar downtown known for its weird drinks and even weirder crowd, perfect first date spot. Friday rolls around. I get there early, because of course I did, I'm trying to impress, grab a table, and start nervously sipping a drink called the Spicy Unicorn. 10 minutes later, she walks in. She looks just like her pictures, but somehow even better in person. She waves, I wave back, we hug, and the night just flows. We talk music, travel, weirdest injuries, mine, broke a toe kicking a fridge after stubbing it. She laughs at all the right places, tells me she's between gigs but doing freelance stuff, and we share a plate of nachos so spicy we both cry. Romantic, right? About halfway through the date, she says, "You seem familiar. I feel like I've seen you before." I laugh and say something lame like, "Maybe in a past life." She gives me a weird look for a second, then brushes it off. The rest of the night goes so well that we walk around the block just to keep the date going. Eventually, we part ways with a hug and a kiss on the cheek. I go home feeling like I just aced the romance SAT. The next day at work, I'm humming to myself like a Disney side character, halfway through my coffee when Roger, the boss, walks in looking like someone peed in his oat milk. He glares around the room like usual but stops dead when he sees me. Then he does something he's never done before in the history of ever. He calls me into his office. I walk in, trying not to tremble. Roger sits down, steeples his fingers, and says, "Do you know who Lana is?" I freeze. Several panic thoughts collide in my brain. Did I somehow get catfished? Is she his wife? Did I accidentally out myself as a serial nacho sharer? I say cautiously, "We, matched on Tinder. We went out Friday night." "Why?" He stares at me, eyes like a predator that just spotted the world's dumbest gazelle. "She's my daughter," he says. Now, you know in cartoons when someone turns entirely white and their soul leaves their body? That happened to me. In real life. I just sat there, mute, jaw dropped, unable to speak. Roger continues. "She told me she went on a date with someone from Tinder. She described you." I showed her the staff directory to confirm. I think I apologized like 6 times in the span of 20 seconds. My hands were sweating so badly it looked like I'd just dunked them in water. Roger raises his hand. "Stop. She's an adult. She can do what she wants. That's not the issue." I blink. "Then, what is?" He leans in, dead serious. "The issue is that I had to hear about your fridge-kicking story over breakfast. My daughter has now heard more about your broken toe than I care to." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Instead, I just muttered, "Understood." He sighs, leans back, and says, "Keep it professional. No funny business at work. And don't screw this up. She's had a rough time lately." And then, just like that, I was dismissed. Now, some of you may be thinking this is where it ends, but oh no, it gets worse. That night, Lana texts me, "Sue, awkward morning?" I laugh it off with her, and we actually keep talking. She tells me she hadn't realized I worked for her dad until he showed her the directory, and she nearly spit out her coffee. But she also says she had a great time and wants to see me again, on the condition that we never mention work during dates. So, I go on a second date. Then a third. And this is where I commit my next fatal mistake. On the third date, we're back at her place, watching dumb YouTube videos, and she asks me if I've met her dad's weird desk dragon. I laugh and say, "You mean the tiny golden one that's always facing east?" I go on to explain how one of the interns tried to rotate it once and Roger spent 10 minutes lecturing him about energetic orientation. She laughs, then pauses. "You've seen the dragon?" "Yeah," I say. "It's like his office mascot." She gives me a long look. "You've been in his office?" I blink. "Yeah, like twice. Once this week." She squints at me. "Wait. What do you do for the company again?" Now, remember earlier how I said she's between gigs and doing freelance? Apparently, she didn't quite piece together what my role was. She thought I was in the IT department or something. So I tell her. I'm the senior campaign strategist. I lead most of the client-side initiatives. She goes pale. "That means you're the guy my dad said was up for promotion." Yeah. "Why?" She closes her eyes. Oh my God. This is so much worse. I'm now panicking. "What's worse?" She groans and pulls a pillow over her face. "My dad said he's not promoting anyone who doesn't have a clean slate, no drama, no entanglements. I may have kinda told him I'm dating someone serious last week to get him off my back about my life. And he may have said, and I quote, "If it's someone from my office, they're out of the running." So here I am, accidentally dating my boss's daughter, who didn't realize I was gunning for a promotion, and now possibly tanking the best shot I've had in years at a better role, because I kicked a fridge, shared too much about it over nachos, and fell for a woman with an unexpectedly terrifying father. I've been keeping it quiet at work, trying not to make waves, while also still seeing Lana on the down low. And I've definitely been avoiding eye contact with Roger ever since. Every time I see the golden desk dragon, I swear it's judging me. TIFU by trying to impress my girlfriend's family with a home-cooked meal, so this happened a couple of months ago, but the memory still haunts me in 4K. I, 27M, have been dating my girlfriend Emily, 26F, for a little over a year. Things are great between us, she's smart, funny, kind, and way out of my league. Her family is super close-knit and I really wanted to make a good impression, especially on her parents. Her dad is this intimidating ex-Navy guy who's also somehow an amateur gourmet chef, and her mom is like a Pinterest board brought to life. They do Sunday dinners regularly and a few months back, they invited me. First two went well. I brought wine, helped with the dishes, laughed at her dad's dad jokes, all that. But I felt like I needed to do something more. So I told them, kinda impulsively, "Hey, why don't you come to my place next Sunday and I'll cook for all of you?" Instant regret. Emily looked surprised, her mom lit up, and her dad raised an eyebrow like I just challenged him to a duel. But they said yes. The pressure was on. I spent the week researching dishes that would seem impressive but were foolproof enough for my skill level, which I'd rate at above instant ramen, below anything involving deglazing. I settled on homemade mushroom risotto with seared scallops and a flourless chocolate cake for dessert. Emily offered to help, but I said no, trying to preserve the illusion that I'm a competent adult. Fast forward to Sunday. I deep cleaned my apartment, lit a candle that smelled like expensive wood and masculinity, and put on jazz I didn't understand. I even ironed a button-down shirt. The parents arrived right on time, and Emily gave me a "you got this" squeeze on the arm. Her mom brought flowers, her dad brought a bottle of wine and the look of a man prepared to be disappointed. Everything was going okay at first. We made small talk, they sipped wine, and I tried to look relaxed. I started the risotto, which was immediately stressful. It's one of those things you can't stop stirring or it turns into wallpaper paste. While I stirred, I threw scallops in the pan. I'd watched like 15 YouTube videos on how to sear them perfectly. The first batch came out pale and gummy, so I cranked up the heat for round 2. Here's where everything went sideways. The pan got too hot. Way too hot. I dropped the next set of scallops in and instantly there was smoke. Not like a little kitchen oopsie smoke. Like, smells like a house fire smoke. The scallops were burning to the pan like tiny flesh meteors. I panicked and tried to move the pan off the heat, but in doing so, I dropped it. Hot oil splashed everywhere, on the stove, the counter, the floor, and most critically, on me. My wrist got scorched, I let out a noise that sounded like a medieval curse, and I stumbled back, knocking over the wine bottle that shattered on the tile. The smoke alarm went off. Loud. Ear-piercing loud. I'm standing there, smoke billowing, bleeding slightly from a shard of glass, with a pan of charcoal scallops on the floor and a death scream of a fire alarm above me. Emily's dad jumped into action and turned on the stove fan, opened all the windows like he was clearing a submarine, and her mom was asking if I needed a bandage. Emily looked both horrified and like she was trying not to laugh. I tried to salvage the risotto. It was glue. Not metaphorically, it could have been used in construction. The scallops were a lost cause, so I ditched them. At this point I'm sweating, bandaged, ashamed, and possibly slightly concussed from stress. I offered to order takeout, but her mom politely declined, saying we can just enjoy the dessert. The flourless chocolate cake. The one part one made ahead of time, thinking I was being smart. I brought it out like a man presenting his final project to a professor who already gave him a D-. It looked okay, which surprised me. Her dad said, "Well, let's see what you've got here," and took a bite. I waited. He chewed slowly. Then he looked up and said, "You used salt instead of sugar, didn't you?" I had. I absolutely had. Not all of it, but enough to turn it from dessert to a culinary hate crime. I forgot I moved the sugar to a different container a week ago and had been baking with sea salt like a complete psychopath. Emily tried to smooth things over by saying, "At least it's interesting?" Her mom coughed politely. Her dad just laughed. A deep, hearty, slightly terrifying laugh. Then he stood up, patted me on the shoulder, and said, "Well, son, you've got guts. No idea how you're still alive, but guts." The whole night was a flaming wreck. They left shortly after, claiming it was getting late, and I cleaned broken glass and burned scallops off the floor while marinating in shame. I told Emily I understood if she wanted to break up with me and never speak of it again. But she didn't. In fact, once we were alone, she burst out laughing. Apparently, her family had been joking about how perfect I seemed and wondering when I'd have a normal human moment. Her dad even texted her later that night saying, "He's all right. Tell him next time we'll do the cooking." Which is Navy dad for "I don't hate him." So yeah. I survived. Barely. But my dreams of being the next Gordon Ramsay died in that smoke-filled kitchen, next to the salted cake of shame. I still flinch every time I see scallops. This happened a few weeks ago, but I'm only just starting to process it. I, 28, work as a project manager at a mid-sized marketing firm. It's a relatively chill place, people are friendly, and the company encourages social bonding. My boss, let's call him Tom, mid-30s, is a generally well-liked guy. Smart, confident, talks like a TED Talk in human form. Anyway, a couple of months ago, Tom calls me into his office and says, "Hey man, I need a favor, and you're the only one I trust to pull this off." Turns out, he was planning to propose to his girlfriend of 4 years, Emma. He wanted to do it in a special way, an engagement party where she thinks she's attending a company mixer, only to be surprised with a romantic proposal in front of friends and family. Tom's idea was elaborate, company branding to make it look real, catered food, a DJ, and a speech at the end where he'd pop the question. I love this kind of stuff. Logistics? Themes? Making events look effortless? That's my bread and butter. I told him I was in. He even gave me a small budget and told me to keep it quiet from the rest of the office so the surprise wouldn't get out. So I got to work. Over the next month, I coordinated with the office admin. She thought it was a regular event, booked a local rooftop venue, designed fake invites as Q2 Team Appreciation Night, arranged catering with Emma's favorite foods, info Tom gave me, and even hired a local jazz trio for ambience. I scheduled it for a Friday evening after work hours. The day of everything's perfect. People from work arrive. A few of Tom's friends and family are mingling, pretending to be employees. Emma shows up, smiling but clearly a little confused. I guess Tom told her it was important to him that she came. I signal the jazz band to start the special song he picked, and Tom gives me a nod. He walks up to the mic, gives this really heartfelt speech about finding inspiration not just in work, but in life, and then calls Emma up. He drops to one knee, the whole shebang. People are tearing up. I'm standing near the drinks table, grinning like an idiot because it went so smoothly. Then Emma says, "I can't." Everyone freezes. I thought I misheard her. Tom's smile twitches. She says it again, clearer, "I can't do this." I'm sorry. Tom doesn't even get up. He just stares at her, still holding the ring. Emma starts crying. I didn't think you'd do this in front of everyone. I thought we had more time. She turns and walks out. Not fast, not storming, just calm, sad, deliberate. Someone from Tom's family tries to follow her but thinks better of it. The rooftop is so quiet, you can hear a fork clink on a plate. Tom eventually stands up. Doesn't say anything. Just kind of nods and walks off. We all watched the host of the evening shrink into the elevator and disappear. The party ended shortly after. People milled around awkwardly, whispered, and filtered out. I stayed to help clean up, apologizing to vendors who didn't understand why half the guests left early. The following Monday, Tom didn't show up to work. Or Tuesday. Or the rest of the week. HR sent an email saying Tom was on leave for personal reasons, and one of the VPs was stepping in as interim manager. Rumors started flying, but no one knew the full story except me, and I wasn't about to spill it. Fast forward 2 weeks. I get an email from Tom. Short, just, thanks for your help. Not your fault. Sorry you got pulled into it. I replied something like, you don't owe me an apology. I'm really sorry it turned out that way. Let me know if you need anything. He never responded. But here's where it gets worse. Last week, I got pulled into a meeting with HR. They found out, somehow, that I had coordinated the party and were concerned that I used company resources without approval. I explained that Tom authorized it, even budgeted for it personally. But he hadn't left a paper trail. No receipts, no emails. Just verbal promises. It looked like I threw a fake company party. I wasn't fired, but I got a formal warning and lost eligibility for my year-end bonus. Apparently, misuse of company branding and misrepresentation of internal events is a real thing. I tried to contact Tom again, nothing. Oh, and just to sprinkle some extra humiliation on top, I matched with Emma on a dating app this week. She unmatched me instantly. I hadn't even messaged her. Just the ghost of my face probably triggered a trauma response. So now I'm the guy who helped orchestrate a failed rooftop proposal that tanked my boss's relationship, indirectly got him to vanish from his job, and earned myself a formal warning for doing exactly what I was told. I don't even like jazz. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.